All right. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Irene for the kind introduction and also Elisabetta for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here today and to be part of this day of Concreto Academy. Today, I will talk about a research conducted in collaboration with Professor Alberto Bologna from the Sapienza University of Rome, whom you already met on Wednesday when he spoke about Pierluigi Nervi works. Just to clarify the context of the research, it is a part of an ongoing print program entitled Upcycling Architecture in Italy, and it was presented in the occasion of the last International Docomomo Conference held in Santiago de Chile last December, where I met Irene. Our intervention is entitled What If? As an open question, we would like to discuss on the upcycling, on the design scenario about upcycling of long-span structural components from the 20th century authorial architecture. As I was saying before, this research is part of a more extensive research program, which name is Upcycling Architecture in Italy, Forging and Promoting a Renewed Building Culture. It is an ongoing project funded by the European Union Next Generation, and it aims at analyze the theory and application of upcycling in the case of architectural scale in Italy and in Europe in general. And at the same time, the project intends to encourage the application of upcycling process in the regeneration of the existing post-20th century heritage by promoting also design workshop to identify operational strategy that consider disassembly and demolition as a process within design, aiming for a more rational organization and utilization of our resources. Here you can see the research website if you want to have a deeper look, where you can find a lot of material about this topic. And as I was saying before, the research was initially developed in the occasion of the recent Docomomo International Annual Conference. The Docomomo Conference was focused on the exploration and development of a new idea for the future of a sustainable built environment, while also promoting the preservation of modern heritage. Basically, the conference was divided into thematic macro topics. The first one was sustainable development, and the second one was cultural diversity. In particular, our intervention was part of the section Sustainable Technology Research into Action. So more in detail, the section was divided into discussion session, and we were part of the topic Concrete Long-Span Buildings, promoting strategies for a sustainable rethinking of public architecture and industrial heritage. So in this occasion, we will discuss the intersection between heritage preservation and sustainability. And we propose to talk about the topic of the adaptive reuse through the notion of the upcycling. So what is upcycling? What does it mean? Down to the definition, in technical terms, upcycling is the process of reusing existing structural components in new building. So in a certain sense, in an extreme simplification, let's say, of the process, from an existing building, we made to disassembly selective components and reassembly them in a new configuration and even possible in a different location. So in this way, the lifespan of structural components is extended, and potentially waste is used as the main material in the supply chain, while it is much different from recycling, a more common practice, which reuse materials. And for example, in the case of concrete, the process involved crushing old concrete into small pieces for using it as a sanding new one. So I'd like now to insist on this concept with a methodological premise related to the approach of design for disassembly, which is according to the international standard ISO 28887, and also by definition about projecting buildings that can be easily modified or taken apart in future. This means that materials and parts can be reused instead of going to waste. And this is not at all different from the assemblage theory by the American philosopher Manuel de Landa, which highlights how disassembly and reassembly of structural elements can enrich the concept of tectonics in architecture. Because according to the Lambda, each assemblage has a contingent historical identity. So this shift from technical necessity to architectural expression is not different from what Kenneth Frenton discussed in Studies Tectonic Culture, where he analyzed the relationship between construction forms and architectural meaning. But the term tectonics generally refers to the art of the assembly. Here, in the specific case of defining a process for upcycling, we can see tectonic in the as the heart of disassembly. This theoretical framework has been extended through some recent theoretical education and practical research, like such as recube, rethink, revive, reuse, rotor deconstruction, or upcycling architecture in Italy. But of a particular interest to our paper are the studies conducted by the Structural Exploration Lab at EPFL, led by Professor Corentin Fivet. According to these approaches, demolition is never the first solution to account. This is actually no new idea. These slides collect a series of examples in Europe of entire building dismantled and reused. 7 trends were identified by the research group of Professor Fivet. In this diachronic analysis, spanning from the late 1960s, pioneering period, to the present, a time of diversification, many projects are analyzed. But what is interesting to know is that most of these examples are made of precast concrete and belong to ordinary construction. So, in this sense, one contemporary showcase of the application of upcycling is the housing project in Basel, Switzerland, by Parabase and Monotti Engineering. Here, the idea was to see how concrete elements could be recovered from an existing parking buildings, disassembly, specifically 3D, and then reassembly to build a new housing complex with a strong aesthetic of tectonic that you can see on this slide. But what we get from this is that upcycling is also a matter of design, because some parameters are given, the quantity of elements, the material itself, and their dimension. And here we can see a categorization of parts from the case studies project in 3 categories: structure, surfaces, and elements. But basically, the new quest is how to transform and combine them in terms of design. So we can say that it's a matter of design, but also it was also a matter of revealing existing potential, which confirms that upcycling concrete components can be a new, let's say, benchmark strategy for sustainability and circular construction. Well, just starting from something which is ordinary, like the building we have just seen, we can start to explore if this approach could also serve as a new method for preserving 20th century authorial architecture, particularly in the field of concrete heritage. Here we can see a series of archival pictures from mid-20th century that are building precast concrete, in which well-known Italian architects and engineers, set free from traditional structural requirements, introducing many innovative solutions. In this realm, Pierluigi Nervi is one of the most important actors, and actually the picture in the background comes from his personal archive. This is because he thought of structural systems in terms of tectonics, the very same we previously related to Frampton's works. And on the other hand, his buildings are made from cast-in-place elements that are later assembled into a whole, just as described in the Landa theory. In fact, in 1947, in a paper that I found in the Maxi archives during my PhD research, Nervi sum up his design philosophy into two words, corretto costruire, that means to build correctly. This idea is related to 8 principles which he organized around the topic in a radial and non-hierarchical way. From top, in a clockwise order, we can see science, art, techniques, economic factors, industrial organization, human values, social values, and client's intelligence. Actually, this kind of philosophy consists in considering efficiency and economy above all. But on the other side, the interesting thing is that expressive possibility and architectural beauty could always be found from a oscillation, let's say, of different contingent parameters. So we can say that is nervy essence of architecture. In fact, in the holy footnote of this article, we can see that the term architecture would have been more appropriate, but at the same time related to the usual aesthetic and formal interpretation. So Nervi decided not to formulate it in a generic way, probably to escape any possible critique. But with the publication of Scienza e Arte dell'Ingegnere, Nervi anticipated what will be the first of his most important monograph, Scienza e Arte del Costruire, by extending his thinking beyond the fields of engineering towards the act of construction. Here, it is important to notice the progressive evolution of the title from to build to engineer. And in a similar way, the article entitled Corretto Costruire is, in a certain sense, an early version of the second most important monograph, Costruire Correttamente, in which there is a shift from the theoretical framework to the reality of the construction, from correct to correctly. Also here, the title is similar but slightly different. The verb to build is linked with an adjective correct in the early version, while later it becomes an adverb correctly. And as a consequence, the order of the words has to shift, so the act of buildings becomes primary to the quality of correctness. But the result is an holistic vision of the project that combines efficiency in structural form with efficiency in fabrication and construction process. We see in Nervi design a dialogue between how something performs and how it was made. So many of Nervi's buildings can be classified not only according to the programmatic type, like sport facilities, such as Palazzetto Sport in Rome, or industrial buildings, and so on, but also according to their constructive types, such as shell, isostatic slabs, bearing section, special structure, and so on. Whereas my PhD research interest attempts at verify this idea in the contemporary sea of architecture, and if necessary, adding a series of values of contemporary interest to Nervi's thought. This might be upcycling of schools, longevity, adaptability, sustainability, and so on. This is because we have to find way of dealing this kind of heritage. This timeline that I hereby present starts with the period of a great quantity of construction and ends in the contemporary, where some of these buildings are in disuse. In fact, around 14 and 15 of the last century, many long-span buildings in concrete were built. Here we can see Torino Exposition Hall B by Pierluigi Nervi himself in its original state. In time and due to changing expectation, the issues of aging and poor technological performances, some of these buildings fall in disuse and poor maintenance. Today, many present this state, or even worse, this is one of the best cases of preservation, actually. Nonetheless, and approaching to heritage eligibility, the interest towards this building is growing. So what can we foresee for this future? In the specific case of Torino Exposition Hall, our use was preferred and it is currently under construction, as in the case of the Palazzetto dello Sport in Rome, even if in that case the function is the original one. But what about case of, let's say, minor historiographic interest? How can heritage be safeguarded? And finally, can upcycling be a strategy? We refer to many industrial buildings with long-span concrete structure, whose design is based on a tectonic assembly. Many of these buildings are not listed as heritage and are still free from specific constraints related to their maintenance by cultural and land government institutions. But they present many innovative solutions and in this sense represent a significant case study to extend knowledge, conservation and valorization of the late 20th century heritage through the process of the upcycling. In the city of Turin, Nervi built some of his most famous buildings, such as Turin Exposition Hall that we have already seen, and Palace of Labor, for example. But the largest surfaces are two different industrial buildings, the Mirafiori plant for Fiat and Cromodoro plant in Venaria Reale. Starting north in the Venaria Reale area, the Cromodoro plant was built in the early 1960s. Looking closer, we notice the repeatability of the structure involving an on-site prefabricated system and a ferrocement assembly process to simplify the construction and, of course, shorten delivery to the building site. This is a picture from the construction site, but in the idea of upcycling, we could imagine that this is also the same moment in which we could disassemble the pieces to later use them in a different construction. A very similar situation, yet even bigger in terms of area, is the case of Mirafiori plant, south of Turin. This is an early project for Fiat, in which Nervi was in charge to follow the new extension of the industrial area, and also having to deal with prefabrication and assembly to shorten the construction site and simplify the technological aspect. In fact, the covering structure of this new core was supported by a very specific and slender concrete trusses. Here we can see Nervi's structural genius in the use of minimum material and minimal section in line with economic design criteria. And again, we can imagine that this is in the same moment of disassembly process. In this sense, these case studies are significant to contextualize the theoretical and design approach of upcycling, and so the ethical implication. So we have not actually tested an application of the design, but the question we pose is, in the case of disuse or even demolition, can we imagine a new life by reusing the existing elements? Will we consider this a new form of heritage in future? So we will say that this is a potential action that represents an opportunity for preservation of cultural and intellectual heritage, because it's not just about preserving tangible values, but it's also the intangible one in terms of idea, visions. So we think that this immaterial dimension is just as important as the material one. And so can the upcycling of components offers an alternative to preserve this legacy? It is the main open question of our research. And to conclude, and in line with the topic of Concreto Academy, in this sense, our research aims to emphasize the exploration and development of a new idea for the future of a sustainable built environment, which can also open up new boundaries and design scenario. Thank you again for the invitation. It is always interesting to share about architecture. And in this slide, I leave you with my mail in case you have some interest, and the one of Alberto Bologna for what concern Upcycling Architecture Italy, where you can find a lot of material on this topic. Thank you so much.